Hi, everybody, and welcome to another LunchBunch show. This is going to be an amazing show. We have the prodigal son has returned. Yes, David Leopold has come back to the lunch table to join us today. And the reason for that is that we're going to be talking about Hangouts on air. And I want to see if there's kind of a correlation between Hangouts on air and where public access TV was. And both David and Scotty have experience with public access TV. But before we start, I want to introduce the panel, and we're going to start with David. David, say hi and tell us who you are.
My name is David Leopold. Folks know me as Small Biz David, and thank you. I need to say this because it was Ray Hiltz who did the first HOA that I ever appeared on, and what is that, about a year and a half ago now, Ray?
Yeah, at least.
And you created a monster, Ray.
I know, I'm still getting hate mail.
You took me out of public access television and you put me in the HOA world.
Thanks, David. Jerry, how are you? Good to see you again.
Hey, Ray, how are you? Jerry Michaels with Steam Feed Radio, Steam Feed TV.
Thanks, Jerry. Jessica.
Hello and great big hugs. I'm Jess with Red Direction, and I'm a purposer.
Good. Okay. And I hear a great dancer, but we'll get to that later.
Maybe.
John, good to see you back.
Oh, and it's good to be back. I work in corporate communications. I'm a video production professional, and I'm also a podcaster with my podcast, Communications Breakdown.
And a great podcast, if I am a bit biased. Yes. Randy, how are you today?
I'm well. My name's Randy Bowden. I run a digital consulting agency, marketing group. I would like to say that I always enjoy these in the sparkle of Jessica that she brings to it, but I was intrigued to find that David was back on because his on-air voice just mesmerizes me all the time.
There you go. Oh, Scotty, wow, can you beat that? There you go.
Well, he stole my thunder about talking about Jess's sparkle. He's, I guess, wanting to be a rugged guy or something. Randy, that is. Jeff, Scott, the Scott treatment from sunny Seattle.
Thank you, Scotty. And Vivek, how you doing, Vivek?
I'm fine. I probably am the only software developer in this group, at least in this panel. So
that's a good bet, yeah.
I'm here to get my fix of socializing.
I'm glad we can be of help. So today, yes, we're going to be talking about Hangouts on air. They've just bursted on the scene. I mean, especially since the new year, I've really noticed a lot of Hangouts on air. And if you're on the platform at all, and you are if you're watching this, then you know how many there are. And if you take a look at your guest, your fellow company in the comment track, in the comment section, you'll see a lot of familiar faces, because I've noticed that a lot of people go from Hangout to Hangout to Hangout, and it's almost sort of like network TV, but on a social media platform. So we have two people here who have experience in the public access TV business world, and I want to talk to Scotty. I want to ask them, basically, Scotty and David, do they see a comparison of Hangouts on air where they are now with sort of early public broadcasting? Maybe I'll throw that to Scotty first.
Okay, sure, and I see tons of similarities, with the difference being that back in the public access era, which I peg from 1982 to 1999 for me, and probably the early thousands for everyone else, there was scarcity. And with Hangouts on Air, it is, what would public access be if you took away scarcity? So in 1982, we opened a public access studio in Seattle, and we started off at 6 hours a day and a staff of 6. And by 1999, we were up to 19 hours a day of broadcasting, a staff of 17. And we're creating 40 live programs every week out of our studio, plus a ton of taped shows, and it was very robust. The concept of public access is that cable companies would run their cables, now it's fiber, down the public right-of-way, so they ought to give back to the public for the use of the public space. And one way was to create PEG access, public education government channels. And the public access channel was to be citizen speech, because democracy is dependent upon an exchange of ideas, and that's part of the First Amendment freedom of speech. In Seattle, we had a free speech channel. Most places throughout the country had more of a community access as opposed to a public access look and feel, which meant that it was the community that built around the channel that was the important thing. And I think many of those may have survived, maybe even to this day, but the free speech model in Seattle had its seeds of its own destruction because there was no real community. Everyone knew that it was fair, but nobody had skin in the game. So when controversial programming came on the channel, nobody stepped up to the plate to defend their institution, and then it died on the vine. So Hangouts on Air, I think, and Google Plus are intricately interwoven, and there's a community that is mutually supportive, and I think that that is the key going forward to make this a new, wonderful format of communications by citizens, by the small guy, it levels the playing field, and not only locally but around the world. So that's my
Scott, can you, and you skirted around this topic, but you said nobody had skin in the game. Basic local access broadcasting or community televisions or something like that, you have to pay to be on that channel, correct?
With public access, it was actually free, and it was part of a franchise arrangement that municipalities had with the local cable system. So it was basically anything that was necessary in order to allow citizens to have access to one of the channels. So if there was a facility that was needed, the cable company in Seattle spent $2.5 million on a studio. If they needed equipment, then it provided equipment. And porta-packs were $10,000 a pop back then, and there was a remote van and all sorts of other things. And if there was training that was necessary, we provided that. It was all part of the franchise agreement, and because having a cable franchise has been likened to having a printing press to print money, cable companies across the country were more than happy to provide for PEG access if they could have essentially a monopoly in the local facility. But then the lobbyists in Washington in 1992 and then again in 1999 cable lobbyists wrote the telecommunications legislation that was passed by Congress, and it essentially gutted a lot of the public service components that they were required to provide in terms of having the right to lay fiber or wires in the public right-of-way. And that was also contributing to the downfall of public access throughout the country.
Scotty, I'm more familiar, and I want to get to David very soon, but I'm in Canada anyway, I'm more familiar with community TV as you described it, where whether it's an ethnic community or any kind of community gets together, and our cable stations here have to provide through government allowance a space on the frequencies for them, and maybe that's what you're talking about. Is that the same thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's very similar. We had sister relationships between Canadian public access, I guess you call it, and ones in the United States. The Alliance for Community Media had lots of chapters from Canada. So it's the Canadian way of doing public access, I guess.
So I want to get back to the community because I think that's an important point when you're making the connection between HOAs and public access TV, is that the community is an important factor. David, what's your involvement? What's your experience with public access TV?
Well, Scott made made very salient points about what he was saying. His involvement in public access television in Seattle was much deeper than my involvement in Cincinnati. My involvement in Cincinnati was purely as a producer. I produced essentially the same kind of content that I'm producing today. I was just going into a public access studio to produce it. I and actually just listening to Scott speak too, in Seattle they were much more structured than we were here in Cincinnati, way more structured. And he was in it a long. I didn't get into it until about 2007. My reason for getting into public access television was that I started a company in 2006, 2007 called Dreaming with Entrepreneurs. The mission of the company was to produce reality small business television shows. So I had been actually producing an internet radio show inside of the public access television station in a studio just across the hall from the television studio. They liked my content, small business information, and they said, would you produce a television show? I said, sure. So I produced 65 television shows in a 2-year period. I really was into it. I did them Monday nights and Saturday mornings, and to Scott's point, theoretically we could say or do whatever we wanted to do. It was in the public domain, and that was the purpose of setting up the public access channels. Then with me, after about the 60th show, it became very difficult for me to continue producing because I couldn't bring my own production company in. I had to use the resources inside of that nonprofit organization, which was okay, but they didn't take my television shows as seriously as I was taking them. So I left, and I'll do a real quick fast forward. I went from public access television content, moved it over to a streaming website. Same concept, but used the technology of that streaming website. I produced 1,000 hours of the same kind of content on that website. The website closed down one day without any notice. That's when I started doing YouTubes. Same content, different technology. Then when HOAs came into play, it was a very efficient way for me to do the same thing I was doing. I could do an HOA, get the SEO value from Google because I was in my Google stream, then it automatically became a YouTube. So it was a very efficient way for me to do business. I guess we're going to kind of get into a discussion today of where our HOA is going. I don't have the slightest idea where they're going, but all I know is they help me to accomplish my small business goals and objectives.
So they seem pretty seamless. Sorry, I'm just going to go to your comment in a sec, Jess. I just want to make a point that what you described, David, seemed pretty seamless going from where you were in video in a more traditional way into what you're doing now with Hangouts on Air.
I went to a television studio that Scott described, and here I am in my own studio, in my own home, and doing essentially the same kind of thing, but just I don't need a big production staff to do it. Right. It's me and me and me.
I'm going to blue box a comment that Jessica has. Jessica?
Yeah, Vivek put this up a little earlier. Lee asked a question. Are HOAs the new community TV?
I'll address that. I think that HOAs fulfill the promise that was broken by community TV or public access.
What was that promise?
Well, the promise was that citizens would be able to have community expression via, in that case, it was a cable channel, and it did not deliver on the promise for different reasons.
For all the normal reasons, governmental interference or bias or corporate interest or just eyeballs, And but from what I'm understanding, for this space, public access space, it's being subjected to the normal disruption that we're starting to see across the internet. Even with public access television, you still had to play by a certain amount of rules. I bet you had more requests for shows than you could actually entertain, right?
So we had a lottery that we had maybe 250 applications for series and 150 slots to fill, and so every 6 months there would be kind of a what was that game when people would be walking around on chairs and then musical chairs? It would be a musical chairs every 6 months. So you're right.
Yeah, and what's the good news now is that barrier of entry, in other words, the production construct and also the technology required to send that signal to air, has now been down to a web camera. And that's probably what David's talking about.
Okay, can I ask? I want to jump on that, John, because that's true. But is that going to continue to be true as we compete for eyeballs? I mean, are we going to be forced to raise the quality of the productions? I'm going to throw some stuff out there and let's see what sticks. First of all, there's the whole idea of monetization, which David brought up, and a lot of people, as we see, have sponsors on the Hangouts on Air and are looking to monetize their Hangouts on Air. Does that bring it to another level? Secondly, Hangouts on Air happen on a social media platform. Google Plus, as such, is a social platform. And the third thing we're going to throw out there, and you guys can grab whatever you want, is when we take Hangouts on Air and make them mobile, what is the difference between that and a news team going on with a remote camera or an iPhone or whatever and doing news coverage? So I'm going to throw that out there, and you guys, whoever wants to grab whatever, go ahead.
I'm going to start, and I would say that, yes, the competition is going to change the bar, and it's going to make why we're doing what we're doing, the clarity of our vision and our mission, and the people we are trying to reach and what we're trying to say to them, that much more important. And if we are working on that now, we are ahead of the curve, and the people that are coming in after us, they're going to have to work on that, and we've already figured that out. So I believe with this whole medium, social or otherwise, how cool is it that by taking a look at our business, thinking about what we're trying to do, and really being smart and on message all the time with all of the other wonderful stuff and the other people that support our messages and complement our messages, we can reach the people we want to reach.
Ray, I'd say for just kind of clarity in my mind of what you mentioned about how would that be different, or how being mobile could impact like news delivery or in the field reporting or something. I mean, that's happening right now. I mean, look at every evening you get on the national networks, and they're using, Jess saw some wreck and she shot a video on her smartphone and submitted it. They're combing YouTube to grab that. I mean, and that's how they're getting instantaneous. I mean, look at the jetliner that crashed, at the airport. I mean, they used the guy that got off the plane's video that he took instantaneously. So that's happening. The problem that you would have if, say, Randy wanted to go out and start something, how would I build credibility in an audience in building some kind of news reporting channel out there?
Yeah.
So Randy, you didn't realize how true your words were when you said it's happening right now, because this very second there are a series of mobile Hangouts on Air that are being originated by Jim Schenkel, live coverage, Mayflower, and then in Arkansas. We will rebuild, and after the show I'll put a link to the event page, and people can go in and see these citizen-produced Hangouts on Air. Each of them are 2 to 3 minutes in length of just interviews with people who are who are after the regular press has gone. Now what? And so these interviews are with real people on the ground who are in the aftermath of the tornadoes that were there.
Can someone describe for me what the difference then is from someone with an iPhone capturing an accident or a storm or something, and then uploading that to YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and a Hangout on Air going into a location and doing a program?
I'd say money. I think the first thing is, I live in the city of Toronto, and I'll tell you what my Google Hangout daydream is. It's to go downtown Toronto and wait for Rob Ford, our embattled mayor, to walk out and just join that press clag that hangs out on his every movement and whatever, and just send that as its own channel. I don't know what the response will be. I don't know exactly how to monetize it. But I would tweet CNN. I would tweet the Canadian Broadcast Corporation and anybody else I thought that might want to buy or pick up my stream, or just basically the old stringer concept where you go out, you find some shots, and you try and go sell those back to the photo editor.
And why would you use the Hangout on Air, John?
That's what's happened with content, photography, and video today. Is everybody's got the ability to capture something, just like John's idea. The paparazzi out there are hounding celebrities to get that one shot to sell it, right? Well, nowadays people are, every evening the news says, hey, if you've got some pictures sent, sure, they'll take all the free stuff you got them, and they'll peruse through them. Once you submit it to them, it's theirs. It's their property.
Yeah, but what we're describing is kind of guerrilla news capture with a video camera. Hangouts on Air take a lot of work.
I would
think
throw
that's what
that
you have
more
to-
into a
I'm sorry.
documentary style delivery, though. That goes back to how would you start building an audience?
I think the difference is, I think there's a difference in structure. There's a difference between a guy going out and posting one time a video that he got on with his iPhone, as opposed to having a structured platform like a Hangout on Air could be, as something like this. And I think if you look back, someone who may be right in the middle of this whole thing, who's in the middle of regular TV and Hangouts on Air, is Leo Laporte and Twit TV. He's been doing this for a long time, and he's kind of built something similar. It's quite a bit more structured, but I think the structure is different, and that goes back to what Jessica was saying earlier. At some point with these Hangouts on Air, we have that ability to structure something, and we're going to have to look, like you mentioned, a little more professional. We're going to have to check your backlighting, those kind of things are going to come into it. I think that's where there's a difference. The guy with the iPhone isn't really concerned about any of that stuff. He's just capturing.
And to add to what Jerry's saying, what about the people that, I mean, if we're doing stuff like this and people are actually interested in our content, we are missing a piece when we're staying on the Hangout side. Everything goes to YouTube. We have this opportunity through YouTube to maximize and connect with people and create a whole other community. And depending on the content, I mean, I met a guy, you can hashtag the tie guy, and Patrick has videos of tying ties, and he is making money from AdWords on his tie videos. So depending on the type of content we have, I see no wrong with considering the built-in advertising on YouTube to create a passive revenue stream to support the ability for the equipment that we need, for the staff that we might need, for the help that we might need to get these videos that people are coming to us to watch.
How important is the social component of a Hangout on Air then, Jessica, if we're talking basically monetization through YouTube uploads and using YouTube as your channel?
I think we are actually missing out on the interaction bit, aren't we? The interaction that you have with the which is there in a Hangout, which is not there on a TV.
I think it can be purposed both ways. I agree with you, Vivek. I think it can completely be purposed both ways. That the idea of community and having an audience that you engage with and connect with in the moment or in a replay on a conversation is very important to the community side of things on Google+. The thing is, nothing from the event page here goes to YouTube. So there's a whole other opportunity on YouTube to take these videos and build replay value and subscription value and conversation in another way, in another place that also adds value. And in both places, you're increasing awareness and opportunity.
Yeah, you've got, Ray, your Google Plus community has this built-in component. That's the Hangout on Air. So everybody in your community gets to, if they want, they can either participate on air with you or sit in the audience and watch it at their leisure, live or whenever they come back to it. And over the year and a half or so that we've been doing these things, that audience has grown and grown and grown, and people put it in there, and you start seeing recurring comments from same fans. So you've spent the time. But this is a niche community. It doesn't go beyond that. So what Jessica's saying is, how do you take YouTube or take these Hangouts on Air and reach that broader community that resides on YouTube and start delivering these type, okay, we're talking about Hangouts on Air and the benefits of them and where they're going to go in the future. How do you take that and start delivering it beyond the audience that resides in your Google Plus community?
That's a good point, because that was one of the questions that I had asked earlier. Is that if we take Hangouts on Air off the Google Plus platform, how do we do that, and what's the effect when we do that?
It'll be YouTube.
Yeah.
So one of the ways to think about Hangouts on Air is not to think of it that way, but that it is Google's video production service that they provide to us. And if you cloak it in those terms, Hangouts on Air are one aspect of it, but take the raw footage and do what every production facility does. And they take a raw footage and then they finesse it into something that is specific for its purpose.
You can embed the videos on your website.
Bam, that was the Scott treatment promotion there.
Well, I wasn't trying to be too self-serving, but thank you, Randy.
Well, and here's a
The
question
fiver's in the mail.
Stephanie asks, does the SEO value of Google Plus platform via the integration with Google Search give a lasting advantage to HOAs as opposed to other YouTube video products?
I'll take a shot at that answer, that question. We all know that Google really knows how to monetize an HOA, and it's called YouTube. And the interesting challenge that is out there, and Google controls it, there's a different set of terms of service for a Hangout on Air than there is on a YouTube. And Google loves it that way because they're going to make it increasingly more difficult for us to try to monetize what it is that we are trying to do. Scott made a beautiful point a minute ago when he said that HOAs are the content provider for this big network called YouTube. I was the production company for YouTube. I was amazed when I found out. I read a story this weekend. There's a company that owns 20,000 YouTube channels, and it's talking about being sold, and we're talking about millions of dollars. Well, these guys know how to monetize all that stuff, but Google loves it. You and I, all of us, when we do HOAs, we are providing content, and Google loves the content because it makes their searches more relevant, more timely. And then they were very smart in saying, okay, we're going to send it to YouTube. Once we send it to YouTube, then we've got all the other mechanisms in place that allow us to make money on YouTube with our content.
Which is their advertising and AdWords.
Yes.
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 That's right.
Just did you have a comment?
I do, and it is a comment from Mark. He says, I think that the quality will be demanded by the viewer. As time goes along, the viewers will show this demand with their participation or lack thereof in the shows as time goes along. So your question, Ray, is yes, the demand for quality will be there, pushed by the consumer demand as time goes along.
Okay, so that's a great lead into basically our wrap-up question is basically, and I want to hear from each and every one of you, where do you think this is going to be, say, 6 months to a year from now? What are Hangouts on Air going to look like? Who wants to go first?
I'd like to start, and just I guess my overall comment is I'm pretty excited about Google Hangouts on Air in the corporate video production space. In that I could go into a seminar, I can go into a convention and start generating content and edit-free content, stuff that I don't have to go into post-production for, because that gets very costly. So just like you, Ray, start, stop, that's your production. You're not doing any editing. Google's giving us a live switch right now that's voice-activated. Fantastic. All of your post-production is textual. You write out some words, you redistribute the content, you summarize it, and all the normal type of textual stuff. So for myself, I don't know where it's going into the public space. I'm interested to watch it, but within the corporate space, that's me following the money.
Oh, cool.
I'd pick up on that and agree with John 100%. Public space, I'm not that excited about that. I don't really see it being rooted. But on the corporate side, you got to think about. John is an expert in production. Okay, some company hires him instead of having to fly him to Seattle or whatever. He can sit in his office, in his living room or whatever. They can project him on a big screen. They can bring in 3 or 4 people on the panel on the film strip from that organization, and then have a auditorium full of their employees, and they can do a live interview, or he can deliver the content in that way. That to me is valuable. Now, it's also a time saver. It's a money saver and it's a time saver, and people pick up on that pretty quick.
Okay. Jerry, you just started Steam Feed TV recently on the Hangout on Air platform. What do you think? Where do you think it's going to be?
I have to agree with John and Randy in that. And here's where I see Hangouts on Air being the reason why it's more of a business-oriented thing. It's because of those abilities to be able to have archived views and to be able to monetize it. I don't think it's going to do much in the social space because they have Hangouts for that. I think the social folks are using Hangouts for their family get-togethers and that type of things. They don't need that to go to YouTube. So I think that's where the divide line is, and I think we're going to see a lot more of what John was talking about, because it gives people the opportunity and businesses the opportunity to expand and do some really creative stuff. It's really limited to just your imagination, I think.
Oh, very good. That's a nice distinction between the Hangouts and the Hangouts on Air. Anybody else want to put a last word in?
Sure.
Yeah, I would. Oh, go ahead, Scott. You first.
No, go ahead. You go, Jess.
All right. So, I love everything that everybody's saying, and what I think is going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months is we're going to see Randy, the genuine rugged guy, and Ray, a really cool dude, and me with all of my sparkle, and every one of you with your taglines. I don't know. The Scott treatment, right? I think we're going to see different ways to purpose this. Absolutely, positively new, creative, out-of-the-box thinking that we have not seen before, nor could we even dream of today, because of the amazing people that are using this platform, and they're using Hangouts on Air. And when you get like-minded people together, boy, can those ideas flow and grow and come up with something pretty darn amazing.
Thank you, Jess. That was great.
Oh.
My head's spinning about all the repercussions of that, of actually using this as a collaborative platform as well. Cool. Sky.
Well, I don't know if I should have gone first so that we could have ended on Jess's sparkle, because that was great. I agree with everyone, and I think in the social space it's going to take off and go to the stratosphere, and who knows how that's going to be. But to speak to what we're talking about with corporate use or business use of Hangouts, I think this will kind of settle into what we used to call industrial level productions. So it's not broadcast quality, but it's not amateurish, and people will come to it and they'll know that it's not exactly what they're going to see on HBO, but that's fine because they're interested in the content. And with the winner-take-all nature of the internet, Google or Google Plus has a fighting chance of becoming the default video production service that most people will want to use.
Vivek, you've got a comment? It's also an environment saver?
Well, that would go back to, like, you're not having to buy a plane ticket, therefore less fuel being expensive.
Okay.
Something like that. I guess that's where that one's coming from.
Listen, well, thanks. It was an amazing conversation, and there's so much. And just from your responses, just my head's just going crazy trying to think of all the things we could do with Hangouts on Air. There's such an amazing variety of shows on the platform, and I can't keep up. I have my watch later list and my playlist on my YouTube channel is like ridiculously long. So anyway, thank you again. This is a great bunch. I love my LunchBunch crew. And if you want to learn more about Google Plus and keep up with the updates, sign in for my newsletter at newraycom.com. So thanks, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.